Genesis chapter 24 tells the story of how Abraham sends his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac. This chapter emphasizes God's providence and guidance in fulfilling his promises to Abraham's family. Here's a brief summary of the chapter. Before we start, we'd like to ask for your support. If you enjoy our video, please hit the like button. This will help us reach more people and create content for you. Now let's get started with today's video. Genesis 24, Abraham finds a wife for Isaac. In this chapter, the Bible provides a narrative that demonstrates God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises to Abraham and his descendants. The story centers on the process of finding a suitable wife for Isaac, Abraham's son, ensuring that the family lineage continues as part of God's covenant. Verses 1 to 4, Abraham's command to his servant. The chapter begins by noting that Abraham is now advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed him in all things. As part of ensuring that God's covenant continues through his family, Abraham calls his most trusted servant. Many believe this servant was Eliezer, who had been mentioned earlier in Genesis 15 verse 2, but his name is not explicitly given in this chapter. Abraham instructs his servant to swear an oath concerning the future of his son, Isaac. Abraham's concern is that Isaac must not marry a woman from among the Canaanites, the people living in the land where Abraham now resides. Instead, he commands the servant to travel to his homeland, likely Mesopotamia, and find a wife from among his relatives. Abraham seeks to maintain the cultural and religious integrity of his family by ensuring that Isaac's wife would come from his own kindred, not from the surrounding pagan tribes. Verses 5 to 9, the servant's concerns and Abraham's assurance. The servant expresses a legitimate concern. Perhaps the woman may not be willing to follow me to this land. The servant's anxiety reveals the potential difficulty of the task, as he anticipates that a woman might not be willing to leave her family and homeland for a distant and unfamiliar place. Abraham, however, assures his servant that God's providence will ensure success. He reminds the servant of God's covenant and faithfulness, saying that God, who called him out of his father's house, will send his angel ahead to guide the servant. Abraham believes that God will make the mission successful, based on his earlier promises to multiply Abraham's descendants and give them the land. In case the woman does not wish to come, Abraham releases the servant from the oath. This shows Abraham's faith, but also his understanding of the freedom of choice in marriage. The chapter emphasizes both divine providence and human agency. Verses 10 to 14, the servant's journey and prayer. The servant departs, taking with him 10 camels and various gifts from his master. This wealth is likely meant to impress the bride's family and to demonstrate the high status of Isaac and his household. The journey leads him to the city of Nahor, Abraham's brother, which is located in the region of Mesopotamia. As the servant approaches the city, he stops by a well outside the town. Wells in ancient times were key locations where women would come to draw water, and they were often places where important meetings occurred. See also the story of Jacob and Rachel in Genesis 29 or Moses and Zipporah in Exodus 2. Knowing that his task is crucial and desiring God's guidance, the servant offers a prayer. In his prayer, the servant asks for a specific sign. He requests that God reveal the right woman by her offering not only to give him a drink but also to draw water for his camels. The prayer is notable for its simplicity and clarity. The servant does not dictate terms to God but asks for a clear and humble sign. The test of offering water to the camels is significant because drawing water for 10 camels is a labor-intensive task, showing kindness, diligence, and hospitality, important traits in a future matriarch of the family. Verses 15 to 21, Rebekah's arrival. Even before the servant finishes praying, God answers. Rebekah, the granddaughter of Nahor, Abraham's brother, comes to the well to draw water. The narrative emphasizes her beauty and virginity, highlighting her suitability as a bride for Isaac. When the servant asks for water, Rebekah not only gives him a drink but also volunteers to water his camels. This is exactly the sign the servant had prayed for, and it indicates her character. She is hospitable, generous, and hardworking. The servant remains silent and watches her, observing whether the Lord had truly made his journey successful. This moment of quiet reflection shows his reliance on God's guidance and his desire to ensure that he is interpreting the events correctly. Verses 22 to 27, the servant's worship. After Rebekah finishes watering the camels, the servant takes out a golden nose ring and bracelets, giving them to her as gifts. These gifts were symbols of wealth and a formal declaration of interest. He then asks her about her family and whether there is room for him to lodge at her house. When she reveals that she is a relative of Abraham, the servant recognizes the hand of God in leading him directly to the right family. In response, the servant bows down and worships the Lord. He praises God for his steadfast love and faithfulness to Abraham. The servant's response emphasizes the role of prayer and worship in recognizing God's providence. He acknowledges that God has guided his steps exactly as he had hoped and prayed. Verses 28 to 33, meeting Rebekah's family. Rebekah runs home to tell her family about the stranger at the well. Her brother, Laban, upon seeing the gifts and hearing her story, goes out to meet the servant. Laban invites him into their home, offering food and lodging for both the servant and the camels. The servant, however, refuses to eat until he has explained the purpose of his mission. His urgency highlights the importance of his task and his desire to fulfill his duty to Abraham before attending to his own needs. Verses 34 to 49, the servant's explanation. The servant recounts the entire story to Rebekah's family, from Abraham's instruction to find a wife for Isaac to the events at the well. He explains how God answered his prayer, leading him directly to Rebekah. His retelling emphasizes God's role in the process and the importance of the covenant between God and Abraham's family. The servant then asks for a direct response from Rebekah's family. Will they agree to the marriage, recognizing that God's hand is in these events? Verses 50 to 61, Rebekah's consent and departure. Rebekah's father, Bethuel, and her brother, Laban, recognize the Lord's involvement and agree to the marriage. They acknowledge that since God has clearly orchestrated these events, they cannot oppose his will. They give their consent for Rebekah to become Isaac's wife. The servant again bows in worship and gives more gifts to Rebekah, her family, and her attendants. The next morning, the family tries to delay Rebekah's departure, asking for her to stay for 10 more days. The servant, however, insists on leaving immediately, eager to complete his mission. When they ask Rebekah whether she is willing to go, she agrees without hesitation. This willingness demonstrates her faith and courage, as she is prepared to leave her home and family to marry a man she has never met, trusting in God's plan for her life. Rebekah's family blesses her, praying that she will become the mother of thousands and that her descendants will possess the gates of their enemies. This blessing echoes God's promises to Abraham about the future of his descendants. Verses 62 to 67, Isaac and Rebekah's marriage. As the caravan approaches home, Isaac is out in the field meditating. When Rebekah sees him from a distance, she asks the servant who he is. Upon learning that this is her future husband, she veils herself, a sign of modesty and preparation for marriage. The servant tells Isaac all that has happened, recounting how God had guided him to Rebekah. Isaac then takes Rebekah into his mother Sarah's tent, symbolizing that she is now the matriarch of the family. Isaac marries Rebekah, and the text notes that he loved her, indicating the depth of their relationship. Isaac is comforted after the death of his mother, Sarah, through his marriage to Rebekah. This ending highlights the fulfillment of God's promise to provide for Abraham's family and the continuation of the covenant through Isaac's marriage. Key themes in Genesis 24. God's providence. The chapter emphasizes that God is actively involved in the events of his people's lives. The servant's prayer is answered immediately, showing that God hears and responds to those who seek his guidance. Faithfulness. Both Abraham and his servant exhibit faith in God's promises. Abraham believes that God will guide the servant, and the servant prays for and acknowledges God's guidance throughout his mission. Hospitality and generosity. Rebekah's willingness to serve the servant and water his camels demonstrates the importance of hospitality and selflessness, qualities valued in biblical narratives. The covenant and marriage. The marriage between Isaac and Rebekah is not just a family arrangement but part of the larger story of God's covenant with Abraham's descendants. This chapter shows the importance of family lineage in fulfilling God's promises. Genesis 24 offers a rich narrative about faith, family, and divine guidance, showcasing how God's promises unfold through everyday actions and faithful obedience. Please subscribe my YouTube channel. I hope you like this video. Thank you.